what this is people have got kind of an option to answer the question on the census relating to religion. So it's a voluntary question, but around 94% of people who responded to the census actually decided to respond to this question. And it's kind of what you've talked about there, is that we've seen this decline now from 59% kind of identifying as Christians back in 2011. That's fallen to 46%. And it's not a case of then that we've seen a huge rise in the number of other religions across the country. It seems to be more this kind of people identifying themselves with no religion. And remember, we're talking a 10-year gap now between the figures. So what we also might be seeing here, Calvin, in relation to what the numbers are showing, is that maybe older people who are more likely to identify as Christian obviously passed away since the last census. And then the younger cohort that are coming through and popping into the numbers now are probably more likely to be identifying themselves as no religion. So I don't think it's a huge dramatic shift in people deciding to go from being, say, perhaps Christian to no religion. There's going to be that demographic effect within the numbers as well.
Well, that raises a few questions for me, Jamie. First of all, is this a trend? Are we going to see a further decline in Christianity and a further increase in atheism and other religions?
Well, I think looking at it, if you've got more older people who are more likely to identify as Christian, then you'll see the same effect going forward as well there, Calvin. I think the important thing as well is that we are seeing, whilst the numbers are relatively small, we are obviously still seeing some increases in some of the kind of smaller religions as well. So I think Muslims have gone up from 2.7 million a decade ago to 3.9 million. So that's gone from like 4.9% to 6.5%. And if you look at where the ONS data is kind of taking us in terms of the population over the next 10, 20, 30 years, we're probably going to see kind of natural decline in terms of the UK population because we're having fewer births and more deaths. But that'll be topped up with more immigration. So it depends obviously where the immigration comes from. There's an assumption that you get about 200,000 a year kind of net. A couple of weeks ago, the ONS was saying, we had a record numbers of 500,000 in the most recent numbers. But what's going to drive population change in the UK over the next 10, 20, 30 years will be immigration. So I would imagine the 59% down to 46% when you do the 2031 census is probably going to head down south and even less again.
Okay, so yeah, that's an interesting point, because people are saying that immigration has been propping up the church for a while. We are seeing an increase in immigration, but we're also still seeing that decrease in Christianity. Can we see a correlation anywhere in the data on the rise in immigration? Is that steadying the decline in Christianity?
Well, if you look at where a lot of the immigration is coming from over more recent years as well, Calvin, it's kind of coming from non-EU countries. We do see a lot of people coming in from India and Pakistan, and obviously they have different kind of faiths and religions coming from those kind of countries. So I think the numbers aren't really boring up what you're saying, that kind of immigration's popping up kind of Christianity across the country. We've seen this clear decline. I think what the church obviously needs to do really is be looking out in terms of, if we've got this huge cohort of younger people who are not identifying themselves with any religion, what can they do to kind of reach out and kind of connect with those people to replace the people that kind of they would lose at the top end of society at the older ages?
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about the older age group, because people often bring this up as well and say that we have an ageing population on the one hand, and the church is full of elderly people on the other. Therefore, if the population is ageing and we have more elderly people now than we've ever had, surely the church numbers should be rising too.
Well, yeah, but what you've got to remember there is that we are getting more older people on average, but we are seeing a lot more deaths, and they are going to come. So if you think of the population at the moment, Calvin, we're just hitting the point now where we've got a large cohort of people who were born after the Second World War, kind of known as the post-war baby boomers, and they're kind of hitting that point where they're at their life expectancy. So we probably will see a large number of deaths, and that's kind of the conundrum the UK's got. Putting aside the religion, the big kind of ticking time bomb for the UK population is the lack of births that we've got among the population, in part because of the cost to raise children. An interesting fact I was looking at this week, Calvin, is that when you look at people who are the age of 30 now, women, half of women are childless now. Whereas if you go back to the 1950s, it was just 1 in 4. So we are going to see a large number of deaths, not enough births coming into those who are kind of domestic UK kind of people. And that's going to put pressure kind of on the church going forward, I would imagine, because you're not getting the same people coming through to replace the older people who are dying.
I mean, that's fascinating to me, the results of feminism there, that half of women are childless. Surely Christians need to, well, this is a message from me, surely Christians need to be having more children and raising more families. But my question to you, Jamie, is, this is about identity, is it not? The largest rise was in the number of people who identify as having no religion. What do you expect to change there?
Well, I would imagine it's just going to grow as we were talking about the demographic effect. If more and more people are born and they have no connection to kind of the church, when you take the next set of figures, you're taking 10 years on again. No doubt, if it's gone 13% in a decade, Calvin, if you're talking another 13% perhaps in the next decade, it'd be about 1 in 3. So you would have gone from probably over 60% 20 years ago to 59% 10 years ago, then down to 46 and then down to 33. So, there is probably a bit of a crisis in the church in terms of having people identifying themselves as Christian. And there's something, I think these are figures that are a bit of a wake-up call for the kind of the church to look at. What can they do?
And I know you're usually looking at stats that are released and analysing them, but I'd like to get you to make a prediction, if that's possible. How long do you think the Christian church has in the UK?
Well, I think you're far more qualified probably to answer that one than myself, Calvin. I think, the church will be around, for a long, long time. But I think that the days, where a lot of people would be going to the church on a Sunday and resonating more with the church, you can see by the figures that connection is no longer there. And I think, it's never going to return, I wouldn't imagine. You're never going to see the numbers going back up. But I suppose what the church would be looking at is trying to address the numbers that are declining.